Good afternoon. Welcome to the October 2020 webinar of the Ecological Law and Governance Association's monthly webinar series. Today's webinar is on the topic Identity, Equity, Law in Ecological Worldmaking. What I hope we are going to do today is move forward by having an open and organic dialogue about the vision and fight for a more ecologically viable and more just world.
Given the inequalities and the differences in places and spaces, how do we co-create this law that it functions for everyone? Is it even possible? Is it a utopian idea or an ideal? And I just think, before I close, that when we're going forward with this, it shouldn't follow the step of discussions about environmentalism, which has had a very racist history. It has been very exclusionary. So do we talk about co-creation in a genuine way where it's not about tokenism, where it's not about co-opting the knowledge of indigenous peoples or peoples of color and reframing it and then selling it back to them? What exactly do we mean by co-creation? And who is really at the table? Because in my research, some of the solutions to the way e-waste was being recycled was always top down. The people that were involved were never directly involved, were never at the table talking about how can we improve this. So again, it is how do we bring more people at the table, the people who are directly involved, the people who feel it, the people who know it, the people who do it, so that the solution is not prescriptive and it's not top down and it's not by us for you.
So I see that these relations of oppression are continuing to play out in the movement spaces. They happen through instrumentalization. So people trying to be like, oh, let's work with Indigenous people because they have really important rights or really important knowledges. So again, like using Indigenous people to push forward the agenda that is created by the white folk. A common thing happens all the time, asking people to participate. Hey, we have an event next week. Can you come do a land acknowledgement? Can you come speak? As opposed to like creating an event together from the beginning, or co-creating, as Kesha said, events and spaces together. A big one is asking, hey, you folks over in that community, would you come and join our climate movement? Well, what about climate activists going to actually support Black Lives Matter marches and show up for them and show up and provide labor for those movements? Like it tends to be the other way around, saying, come join our movement. So there's this, even when collaborations are being formed, there's this difficulty in people learning to share power, or the big NGOs, environmental and climate NGOs, want to keep calling the shots strategically, have trouble really sharing the power, decision-making power, and purse strings.
And I have always contemplated the environment as a natural force of nature, right? It's very natural. And so nobody should be deprived of it. You should not favor some people with the environment, neither should you disfavor any group of people with the environment. However, unfortunately, this environment which we speak about is subject to human influences. So that automatically gives rise to environmental classism. I'm very careful about using the term environmental racism because the word racism is a controversial one. To me, in my mind, it would be restricted to race and color, right? So I don't think that's the main problem. I think the problem is the classification and the discrimination when it comes to environmental protection. So there's a lot of injustice, and the injustice, the people at the receiving end of this environmental classism are usually minority populations that under normal circumstances will not be able to put up any resistance. Right? I talk from the point of view of the Niger Delta people of Nigeria, which I'm going to give you a bit of a picture about in a few minutes. Now, these people cannot put up a resistance because most of the time they have a peasant economy, right? So now the lives, the livelihood, and even the spiritual connection of these people to the land is jeopardized.
That they have. In terms of the rights of nature, I think it is one of those things where it's kind of a slippery path. I think that there there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that has come out of Indigenous communities in terms of Indigenous studies and Indigenous experts that I often turn to when I'm trying to understand about how to think about these things together in terms of how to think about social structures, laws, legal systems, institutions, and also ecology, because I think one of the vestiges of the colonial legacy is the certain types of separation and compartmentalization. And I think as has been happening across the board in many different fields, I think there's a recognition that Indigenous knowledge isn't just like interesting or kind of thought-provoking, but it's very useful for grappling with a lot of the problems that we see today, which really require a lot of integration of multiple modes of thinking that may be nuanced in a certain way, but also have traditions that go back thousands of years in terms of not separating these things. I mean, even in the US, the origins of our democratic system was with the Iroquois Confederacy. So I think recognizing a lot of the things that already are out there is part of the work that everyone is doing in terms of those marginalized voices, perspectives, histories, et cetera. So I'll end on that.